You're standing in the chilled aisle, looking at a pack of 8 sausages for £3.50. The packaging shows plump, golden bangers with perfect grill marks, but when you get them home and cook them, they shrink by a third, they're oddly pale, and frankly, they taste more like seasoned bread than actual pork. That gap between what you expect and what you actually get. That's exactly what we're looking at today. 8 sausage brands that, when you break down the numbers, the ingredients, and the value, just don't add up. If you want more straightforward breakdowns like this before your next shop, this channel might be worth sticking with. Sausages have always been a staple of the British weekly shop. They're versatile, they stretch across multiple meals, and historically they've been affordable. But over the past 2 years, that's changed. The cost of living squeeze has pushed food prices up significantly, and sausages haven't been immune. In fact, they've been one of the products quietly affected by shrinkflation, where packs get smaller while prices stay the same or even increase. At the same time, the gap between supermarket own-brand sausages and big-name branded ones has widened. Some own-brand options now contain more meat, cost less per 100 grams, and frankly taste just as good, sometimes better. So the question isn't just which sausages taste nice, it's which sausages are actually worth your money. And that's a more complicated question than it used to be. For this breakdown, we've looked at 8 branded sausage products widely available across UK supermarkets: Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons, and the discounters like Aldi and Lidl. These are the brands most shoppers reach for out of habit, recognition, or because the packaging looks appealing. They include Richmond thick pork sausages, 8-pack, 410 grams, typically around £2.65. Walls, thick pork sausages, 8-pack 410 grams, around £2.50. Ye Old Oak premium pork sausages, 8-pack 400 grams, around £3. Heck 97% pork sausages, 6-pack 400 grams, around £3.75. Debbie and Andrews Harrogate sausages, 6-pack 400 grams, around £4. Porky Whites premium Lincolnshire, 6-pack 400 grams, approximately £4.25. Sainsbury's Taste the Difference pork sausages, 6-pack 400 grams, around £3.75. Tesco Finest Cumberland sausages, 6-pack 400 grams, around £3.65. Now, not all of these are bad products, but when you look at them through the lens of value, what you're actually paying for versus what you're getting, some of them become very difficult to recommend. Let's start with the most objective measure: what you're paying per 100 grams of product. Richmond comes in at roughly 65 pence per 100 grams. Walls is similar at around 61 pence. On paper, these look like reasonable budget options. But here's where it gets interesting. Heck, at £3.75 for 400 grams, works out to about 94 pence per 100 grams, nearly 50% more expensive. Debbie and Andrews and Porky Whites push past the £1 per 100 grams mark. The supermarket premium ranges, Sainsbury's Taste the Difference and Tesco Finest, sit around 91 pence to 94 pence per 100 grams. Expensive, but not the most expensive. Richmond sausages contain around 42% pork. That's not a typo. Fewer than half of what you're eating is actually pork. The rest is made up of water, rusk, which is essentially dried bread, pork fat, and various additives. Walls isn't dramatically better, typically coming in around 45 to 50% pork, depending on the specific product. Compare that to Heck at 97% pork, or the supermarket premium ranges, which usually contain 85 to 90% pork, and you start to see a significant difference. Now, in practical terms, this matters because lower meat content often means more shrinkage during cooking, a softer texture, and a less pronounced pork flavour. It's not that these sausages are inedible, it's that you're paying pork prices for what is, in many cases, mostly filler. 8 sausages sounds like a decent amount, but when those sausages are thinner, contain more water, and shrink significantly during cooking, you're left with less actual food than you might expect. We weighed several brands before and after cooking. Richmond sausages lost approximately 28% of their weight during a standard pan fry. Heck sausages, by comparison, lost around 18%. That difference adds up. If you're feeding a family and you've budgeted for 2 sausages per person, you might find the lower meat content options leave people still hungry. It's worth noting that several of these brands have quietly reduced pack sizes over the past 18 months. What used to be a 454-gram pack, the traditional 1 pound weight, has in many cases become 400 grams or even 380 grams, while shelf prices have held steady or increased. The packaging often makes this difficult to spot at a glance. The packs look the same size, the branding hasn't changed, and unless you're checking the weight printed in small text, you might not realise you're getting less. So, which of these 8 represents the poorest value? When you combine all the factors, price per 100 grams, meat content, shrinkage, and actual eating quality, a few stand out. Richmond, the awkward middle ground. Richmond occupies a strange position. It's priced as a budget option, but costs more than many supermarket own brand sausages that actually contain more meat. At 42% pork content, you're paying £2.65 for what is predominantly water, rusk and fat. The brand recognition is strong. Richmond has been around for decades and many shoppers buy it out of habit. But when you can get an Aldi specially selected sausage with 85% pork for less money, the value proposition falls apart. Ye Old Oak. Premium pricing, standard product. The premium label here is doing a lot of heavy lifting. At £3 for 400 grams, you're paying more than Richmond, but getting a product with similar meat content, around 50% pork in most variants. The branding suggests a traditional quality product, but the ingredient list tells a different story. There are supermarket own brand premium ranges at this price point that offer significantly better specifications. Debbie and Andrews, excellent product, difficult price. This one requires nuance. Debbie and Andrews make genuinely good sausages, high meat content, good seasoning, outdoor bred pork. The quality isn't in question. The issue is purely mathematical. At over £1 per 100 grams and with only 6 sausages per pack, a family of 4 would need to spend £8 or more to have sausages for a single meal. For many households right now, that's simply not realistic for what is supposed to be an economical protein option. Porky Whites, the speciality trap. Similar story here. These are marketed as artisan speciality sausages, and they are decent products. But at £4.25 for 6 sausages, you're paying restaurant-grade prices for a supermarket product. Unless you're buying these for a specific occasion where you want to treat yourself, the everyday value simply isn't there. Here's where it gets interesting. The products offering the best overall value aren't necessarily the cheapest, and they're often not the ones with the most prominent shelf placement. Aldi's specially selected pork sausages consistently come out well in these comparisons. At around £2.29 for 400 grams, with 85% pork content, the price per 100 grams of actual meat is remarkably competitive. Lidl's Deluxe range offers similar value, typically 80 to 86% pork, well seasoned, and priced below £2.50 for a 6-pack. Among the branded options, Heck is interesting. Yes, at 94p per 100 grams it's expensive, but when you factor in the 97% meat content and minimal shrinkage, the actual cooked portion you end up with is more substantial than cheaper alternatives. It's not perfect, the price is still high, but pound for pound, you're getting more actual food. The supermarket premium ranges, Tesco Finest and Sainsbury's Taste the Difference, sit in a reasonable middle ground. They're more expensive than budget options, but the jump in meat content, usually 85% plus, means you're not paying extra just for branding. There are a few things that aren't obvious unless you know to look for them. The pork sausages versus sausages distinction. Legally, a product can only be called pork sausages if it contains at least 42% pork. Anything labelled simply sausages may contain less. It's a small detail, but it's worth checking. Rusk position in the ingredients list. Ingredients are listed in order of quantity. If rusk, water or pork fat appears high on the list, within the first 3 or 4 ingredients, that tells you something about what you're really buying. Shelf placement. The sausages at eye level in most supermarkets tend to be the branded options with higher margins. The better value own brand alternatives are often placed on lower shelves, requiring you to bend down to find them. This isn't a criticism of supermarkets, it's simply how retail works. but being aware of it means you're more likely to spot options you might otherwise walk past. Unit pricing inconsistencies. Some sausages display price per 100 grams on the shelf label, others display price per kilogram, and occasionally you'll see price per sausage. This makes quick comparisons surprisingly difficult, which is why it's worth doing the maths yourself if value is your priority. None of this is to say you should never buy these products. Context matters. If you genuinely prefer the taste of Richmond sausages, and some people do, they have a particular soft texture and milder flavour that some find appealing, then that preference is valid. Taste is subjective, and if you enjoy them, that has value. If you're buying for a children's party where quantity matters more than quality, and the sausages will be served with chips and ketchup, the premium options probably aren't necessary. If you're cooking a special Sunday breakfast and want sausages that hold their shape, have good flavour, and feel like a proper treat, then spending more on a higher meat content option makes sense. The issue isn't that budget sausages exist, it's when shoppers don't realise there's such a significant difference between products at similar price points. Informed choice is always better than habitual choice. 3 things to take away from this. It's printed on every pack, usually on the front. Anything below 70% means a significant portion of what you're buying isn't meat. That's not inherently wrong, but you should know what you're getting. A £2.50 pack with 42% pork is actually more expensive per gram of meat than a £3.50 pack with 90% pork. The headline price can be misleading. Aldi's specially selected and Lidl's deluxe sausages consistently punch above their weight. If you haven't tried them because of assumptions about quality, you might be pleasantly surprised. Sausages shouldn't require a spreadsheet, but a few seconds of label reading can mean the difference between genuine value and paying branded prices for what is essentially seasoned breadcrumbs. Look, sausages are meant to be simple. They're a weeknight dinner staple, a fry-up essential, something you should be able to grab without overthinking it. But when household budgets are tight and every pound matters, it's worth knowing which products are actually giving you what you're paying for, and which ones are relying on habit, branding and packaging to justify prices that don't quite add up. It's not about never buying these brands, it's about knowing when they actually make sense for your situation, and when there's a better option sitting right next to them on the shelf. If this breakdown was useful, feel free to leave a comment, give it a like, or subscribe for more of these before your next shop. Thanks for watching.